Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our weekly Torah learning of spreading more light into the world and Torah into the world. We always like to start off with giving because how we give, that's how Hashem can and will give us generously. So please give generously so Hashem will give us generously. I'm going to put a couple of points in the tzedakah box, so please join me from home. And we're going to say Refuah Shalema for some people I personally know, and it's also including all Klal Yisrael. So we're doing Refuah Shalema for Chana Yenta Rivka Bas Shendel, Chana Bela Bas Devora, Yosef ben Devora Leah, Rafal Chaim Meir ben Simachasha, Devora Leah Bas Yafa Liba, Yaakov Yosef ben Bluma. He needs a real like Yeshua. So if everyone could write his name down, Yaakov Yosef ben Bluma. It's a sister friend from this class. It's her husband that really needs a miracle, and I can't wait to share it with you. Please, God. We're also davening for our brothers and sisters, our holy brothers and sisters who are serving in the IDF. These are the ones that I have offhand, but we're including everyone that Hashem should protect them in their holy work. Rafal ben Devorah Leah, Shalom Dober ben Basya Perel, Devorah, Reuven Chaim ben Nechama, Reuven Chaim ben Necha Tamar, Yisrael Ephraim ben Chaya Tzivya. I do this class weekly in memory of my dear grandmother, Rivka Bas Yosef Yehuda. I hope you're proud. My great uncle, who passed away this year, Chaim Dober ben Betzalel. To save a life is saving a world, and he saved many lives in the Soviet Union. And my grandmother, who recently passed, Bela Bas Betzalel. We're also doing this class. This class is dedicating in loving memory by my dear friend Ellen Maris from Brooklyn Heights, in loving memory of her parents, Malka Bas Mordechai and Yisrael David ben Yaakov. Their neshama should have the aliyah. This class is also in memory of two very special people, Yishai ben Tzvi Hirsch and Rasha Bas Chaya Meir. May we see everyone with the coming of the Mashiach immediately. This week's class, we're so honored to have Mrs. Goldie Gansbourg back with us again. She spoke for us a couple of years in the past, and we're honored to have her. We are going to be speaking about Queen Esther. What can we learn from her today? So Mrs. Gansbourg, if you can please unmute yourself. Oh, before we start, I'm sorry, I apologize. We're just going to quickly say Psalm Chaf. I'm sure you don't mind, Mrs. Gansbourg. We're going to say Psalm Chaf, Kapitel Chaf, which is number 20. For the hostages, they should come home immediately. We can't stop thinking about them, and we need to hear good news. And this Purim should be the happiest Purim. We should rejoice with them and with the coming of Mashiach. So Lam Natseach Mizmar LeDavid, Yancha Adonai B'yam Tzara, Yisagevcha Shem Elehei Yaakov, Yishlach Ezracha Mikaidesh, Umitzian Yisadecha, Yiskar Kol Min Chaisecha, Ve'elascha Yidashna Sela, Yitain Lecha Chelvavecha, Bechol Atzascha Yimale, Niranina, Bishuasecha, Uveshem Eleheinu, Nidgal Yimale Adonai Kol Mishale Secha, Ata Yadaiti Ki Hashia Adonai Mishichai, Yanehu Mishmei Kachai Bigburai Seisha Yiminai. Ela Varecha Ve'ela Vasusim Va'anachnu B'Shem Adonai Eloheinu Naskir. Hema Karo V'Nafalu Va'anachnu Kamnu V'Nisaidad. Adonai Hashia Hamelach Yanenu B'Yan Parinu. So without further ado, we're gonna introduce Mrs. Goldie Gansbourg. Thank you for being here and talking about this incredible, I would say, history, but it's something that it's repeating itself year after year after year. And this Purim, we're going to really utilize and be able to tap into it in a whole new light after hearing Mrs. Gansbourg. So thank you for being here. And Mrs. Gansbourg she wears a lot of hats, but she is a very well-known high school teacher and lecturer in Beis Rivka High School, and we're honored to have you.
My honor to be here. I have to say, Chaya, you always impressed me, and all you ladies that come all the time. I hope I'll have something new to say. I'm not sure it's not going to be, honestly, I don't remember what I said last time. I'm on a way hoping you don't remember either, so that in case I say the same thing, you won't be too disappointed. But we read the Megillah every year. So if we read the Megillah every year, I guess it's, we can repeat what the Megillah is talking about every year. The Baal Shem Tov teaches us that if you read the Megillah as if it happened a long time ago, we haven't fulfilled our requirement of reading the Megillah. We need to read it as if it's relevant today. In my humble opinion, it's not hard to see today how we're living the story of Purim, how we're reading the story of the Megillah. It says that the war of Haman and Amalek was not against the soul of the Jewish people, but it was against the Jews. It was against the people. He wanted, in Hebrew, he wanted lahashmid, laharog, la'abed es kol haYehudim minar v'ad zaken taf v'nashim. He wanted to destroy, to kill, to wipe out all the Jews, from young to old, women and children. Does it sound familiar? To me, it does. Sounds very familiar to what's going on today. Therefore, the Jews, they went out to fight a physical war. The nikhalu va'amod al nafsham. They gathered and they stood up for their lives, just like our people are doing now. They're gathering, they're standing up to the fight, and they're fighting. And this wasn't a war just against the Jewish nation, because if you fight the Jewish people, you're fighting against God. So it was a war against God. That was a war against God. And the Torah tells us, Milchama Hashem b'Amalek midor dor. This war of Amalek is generation to generation. Amalek hates us, and Amalek wants to get rid of us, wants to get rid of the Jewish people. And that's the story of Purim. But how does the story of the Megillah end? The story of the Megillah ends that just as then they were saved from an impending disaster, total annihilation, and miraculously, instead of being all wiped out and killed, we prevailed. We lasted. We lived. We were victorious. We celebrated. The same way, Vayam Mahem Bizman Hazeh. The same way in those days, in this time, the same thing will happen, and we'll be able to see the V'naha Fochu. We'll be able to see how everything will be changed around, and we'll be able to celebrate, like it says in the Megillah, that like the days when the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month that transformed from sorrow to joy, and from mourning to festivity. Miyogon l'simcha me'eva le'yomtiv. Like then, now too, it's going to become la Yehudim ha'isa'ora v'simcha v'sasim bikar. I'm saying it in Hebrew because it's the words of the Megillah. To the Jews, there was light and happiness and joy and rejoicing. And that's what we're going to see also, God willing, hopefully even before Purim, so that we could celebrate on Purim. I think before I start with the how Esther could be relevant to me, I think we should start just first with a quick overview of the Megillah itself. So about 60 or 70 years before the story of the Megillah, the Jews were living in Israel, and the Babylonians and the wicked Nebuchadnezzar invaded Israel, made it a vassal state, took some Jews into exile, then took some more Jews into exile. 3 times he invaded Israel, and 3 times he took the Jews into exile. And eventually, in the year 3338, he destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, and he took the Jews into exile, and they were taken into Babylonia. So the Jews are now living in Babylonia for the last 60-something years. The Babylonian Empire is actually taken over by the Persian Empire. So now they're living in what used to be Babylonia, but now it's Persia. And the king right now, at this point when the story begins, is the king Ahasuerus. He took over after Koresh, who took over after Darius, who took over after the Babylonian Empire was destroyed. So now the Jews are living in Israel, in Persia, and it's been about 60, 70 years since they lived, about 60 years, since they lived in Israel. It's the next generation. Some of them forgot Israel. Some of them remembered. A lot of them by now assimilated or became started feeling that the non-Jews were really important to their prestige, to their importance, to who they want to be like, etc. When Achashverosh makes a party in the 3rd year of his kingdom, the Jewish people go to the party. Now, the Talmud doesn't really fault them for going to the party. If a king invites you to a party, if it's the government and the government tells you to come, you could go. The problem wasn't that they went to the party. The problem, the Gemara says, is that nehanu, they enjoyed the party. By enjoying the party, they were showing that Achashverosh was important to them. That Achashverosh was finding favor in the eyes of Achashverosh was important. And what Achashverosh wanted was important to them. And they liked that Achashverosh was wining and dining them, and that Achashverosh was courting them. And that made them feel good. And that wasn't a healthy state for the Jewish people. Because the Jewish people were called like a sheep among 70 wolves. If there's a sheep among 70 wolves, it's a pretty drastic situation, and that sheep is in a lot of danger. And 70 wolves that want to eat up that sheep. But if the sheep has a really, really incredible shepherd who takes care of it, that sheep stays safe somehow. We are like that sheep amongst 70 wolves, amongst a lot of nations that want to destroy us and want to get rid of us and don't like us. But God takes care of us, and he takes care of us in an incredible way, in a supernatural way, in an unnatural way. And we see it day after day after day, how the Jewish people prevail despite everybody that wants not to get rid of them. The Jewish people are victorious, and the Jewish people are strong, and the Jewish people are resilient, and the Jewish people survive and thrive and thrive. And it's miraculous, but Hashem takes care of us. God watches over us. As long as we trust in him, as long as we believe in him. But if we don't trust in God, and we don't believe in him, and we start trusting in the Achashveroshes, and in the governments, and we start thinking like they're the people that we need to trust in, then that supernatural power, or that supernatural protection that we have from God falls away. Because if we want to be natural people and depend on the government that we're living in, and depend on the natural circumstances, then life will be natural. And that's how Haman was able to succeed in his plan to destroy the Jewish people. Because the Jewish people separated themselves, so to say, from God. Because they cared too much about what Achashverosh thought about them. Because they didn't trust enough in God's protection of them. They were more vulnerable, because they were no longer under the supernatural protection of God. They were under natural means. And in that way, Haman was able to be effective in his decree. Now, the Megillah takes place over a span of 9 years. It starts in the 3rd year of Achashverosh's kingdom, and it goes until the 12th year of Achashverosh's kingdom. So in the 3rd year is when Achashverosh makes his party. He actually makes a 6-month party first. The first party in the Megillah is for 6 months, for 180 days. He invites all of his officials, all of the government people, and they have a party for 6 months. And during that 6-month party, you could imagine that there was a lot of government officials there who don't really like the Jews and are threatened by the fact that the Jewish people might rise in power again and might build their temple again, become a strong power again. So they're busy talking about what could we do to make sure the Jews don't rise in power again. And they come up with a very wise plan. Haman helps out in this plan. Achashverosh and Haman and Vashti, and they come up with this plan. If we get the Jewish people to sin, then their God won't protect them. Like we know, God watches over us when we're connected to God. And the non-Jews felt that also. So let's get them to sin, and then their God won't protect them. And so they decide after that 6-month party to make another party for 7 days and invite all the people, not just the government people, but the common people. Included amongst those common people would be the Jewish people, and they would have not kosher food and not kosher wine and immorality, and they would get the Jews to sin at the party. And the Jews, when they were invited, felt obligated to go. The king is inviting them, and they went. Again, it wasn't the going that was the problem. It was the fact that when they went, they enjoyed the party, that they enjoyed that Achashverosh was inviting them to a party. And Achashverosh at the party was not very respectful to God. Achashverosh at the party took out the holy vessels of the Beit HaMikdash, of the Holy Temple, and he used them at his party like dishes. And he wore the clothes of the high priest, of the Kohen Gadol. And he made himself an imitation throne of King Solomon, because he wanted to show the Jewish people, whatever your religion has, you don't really need your own God. And the Jews enjoyed such a party. And for enjoying that party and showing that they weren't connected enough to God, God allowed years later, and it's really 9 years later, but God allows Haman's plan to be effective, or for a time to be effective, because they went to this party. So the first chapter, the first parak of the Megillah is Achashverosh's first party, and then his 7-day party. At the 7-day party is when he calls Vashti to come out. He wants to show off Vashti, and Vashti doesn't come, refuses to come, and Haman convinces Achashverosh that the best thing to do is to kill Vashti, and Vashti is killed. That's all in chapter 1 in Parak Aleph of the Megillah. The second parak of the Megillah is Achashverosh being distraught over the fact that he no longer has a queen, wants to find a new queen. They come up with a plan, gather all the beautiful women, and you pick the most beautiful woman, and she could be your next queen. And the second chapter of the Megillah is that whole process. It describes in great detail that whole process of how he went through. He met many beautiful women. It took 4 years until he finally found Esther. Now, Esther, when she's taken to Achashverosh, you could imagine that she was a Jewish woman, a righteous woman, a married woman, and she dreaded and a beautiful woman. And she dreaded the fact that she might have to become the queen of this Achashverosh. But God was running the world, and she was chosen to be the queen, and Achashverosh liked her very much, liked everything about her except that she would not reveal who she was. She would not tell him what family she came from, what nation she came from. She kept her identity a secret, and that bothered Achashverosh very much. But he marries her in the 7th year of his kingdom. That's chapter 2. Chapter 3 and the rest of the Megillah, the next 7 chapters in the Megillah, all skip to the 12th year of Achashverosh's kingdom. So we went from the 3rd year to the 7th year to the 12th year. Now in the 12th year of Achashverosh's kingdom, I'm sorry, I skipped a detail. After Esther becomes queen, she suggests to Achashverosh that you should put in your gate, and to watch your gate, you should put somebody that you trust. Like Nebuchadnezzar had Daniel, a wise Jew, a trustworthy Jew. Why don't you get somebody? And in that way, she got Mordechai to get a position in the palace too, and he got himself a position. Esther convinced Achashverosh to hire Mordechai as someone to sit by his gates and tell him what's going on in the streets. And Mordechai gets to sit at the gates, and while he's sitting at the gates, he overhears a conversation between 2 of Achashverosh's guards who are plotting to kill Achashverosh. He tells Esther, who tells Achashverosh in the name of Esther, and he saves the king's life. And that's recorded in Achashverosh's book. Okay, fast forward another 5 years, and Esther and Haman rises in power. He becomes very important in the kingdom, and everybody is told to bow down to Haman. Everybody bows down to Haman except for Mordechai. Every time Haman sees Mordechai, Mordechai refuses to bow down, and it angers Haman tremendously, especially when he discovers that the reason why he's not bowing down is because he's a Jew. So then and Jews don't bow down. Jews believe in only one God. That makes Haman furious, and he decides he's not just killing Mordechai, he's going to kill the entire Jewish nation, comes up with a whole plan, and he makes a set of lots to decide what's the most auspicious day, the best day to kill the Jewish people on. And he comes up with the month of Adar, and he's very happy with his plan. And he goes and he home and he gathers all of his friends, and he tells them that I have a great idea. I'm going to get I have everything in the kingdom, everything that I want. I have everything that would make a man happy. Riches, I have wealth, have honor, I have children, I have everything that makes a person happy. The one thing that bothers me and that doesn't allow me to be happy is that every time I go outside, there's one person that doesn't give me honor, and that's Mordechai. And therefore, you have to help me figure out a way of how to destroy Mordechai and his people. And they come up with a plan that they're going to destroy all the Jewish people, and Achashverosh, and he has his time and his month, the month of Adar. He goes to Achashverosh and he convinces Achashverosh to destroy the Jewish people. Achashverosh and Haman are both delighted to destroy the Jewish people. Achashverosh has his own reasons why he hates the Jewish people. Achashverosh's stargazers told him that a Jew will take over his kingdom, so he hates the Jews. He doesn't realize that the Jew is his own son, so in his head he hates the Jews, and he's very happy to destroy the Jewish people. He goes along with Haman's plan, and they're all thrilled. He comes up with this plan to destroy the Jewish people, and he sends it out. He sends out the decree on the 13th day of Nisan, Pesach time, right before Pesach time. He sends out a decree. As soon as the decree comes out, Mordechai learns about it. And Mordechai's initial reaction is to go in the streets and scream and put on sackcloth and ashes and cry and scream. And when the Jewish people ask him what's going on, he tells them. And in bad news travels quickly. Within a very short amount of time, all the Jewish people are mourning. All the Jewish people are in horror. They're all going to be annihilated. Everybody hears about this decree. Everybody's in mourning. The entire Jewish people are destined now to be killed. It's decreed that they're all going to be killed on Yud Gimel Adar, not now, but in 11 months from now. And Esther is the only one that doesn't know about it. Esther asks what's going on. She hears that there's a commotion in the street. She hears what's going on. Nobody knows that she's Jewish, but she hears that all the Jews are mourning, and to her, she's terrified what's going on. She sends clothes to Mordechai to take off his sackcloth and to come in and to tell her what's going on. He refuses because he doesn't want to send a message to anyone that going to Esther is more important than doing tshuva. And eventually, through a messenger, Esther finds out what's going on, and Mordechai sends her back a message that maybe now is the reason why you had to become queen, and now you should go to Achashverosh. Esther says, I can't go. If I go, I'll be killed, because there's a law that you're not allowed to come to the king without being called. Mordechai says, your life is in danger anyhow. You're a Jew. Who knows if Achashverosh, if you'll still be queen next year? But all the Jews are going to be killed. Maybe this is your mission in life. Maybe this is the reason why you were chosen to be queen. You have to go, and you have to go to Achashverosh. Esther says, okay, I'll go. But first, gather all the Jews and fast for 3 days and nights, and then I will go. Mordechai says, fast? How can we fast? It's Pesach time. Esther says, maybe this is the reason why the Jewish people, next year there won't be a Jewish people if you don't fast. So Esther goes to Achashverosh after they fast for 3 days and nights. And she goes to Achashverosh, and she's scared she might be killed. Achashverosh doesn't kill her. And Achashverosh sticks out his scepter to her, and he asks her, what is it that you want? Why are you risking your life? And she says, I want you to come to a party tonight, you and Haman to come to a party tonight. Achashverosh says, sure, coming to a party that night. He and Haman come to a party that night. He asks Esther again, what is it you want? Esther says, I want you to come to another party tomorrow night. Now, Achashverosh is very puzzled, but that's what you say, his queen. He'll come to a party tomorrow night, him and Haman. Haman leaves the party all thrilled. Nobody in the whole kingdom was invited to the party besides him and the king and the queen. So he thinks he's has the epitome of honors. He goes outside and he sees Mordechai. The story that I told you before about him going home to his wife, happened now. Now he goes home and he tells his wife and his friends that I have all the honor in the world. I have everything that a person would want, but I don't but there's this Mordechai who doesn't want to bow down to me. So then they come up with a plan. Okay, you know what? Why don't we build a gallows? Let's get permission to hang Mordechai on the gallows tomorrow. And then by the time you go to the party tomorrow night, feel really good, because now you're getting honor from everyone. You'll have gotten rid of Mordechai, and then you could really go happy home. Great idea. They spend the whole night finding wood, building a gallows very high, 50 amos high. And in the morning, Haman goes to Achashverosh to get permission to hang Mordechai on the tree. However, in that same time period, while Haman was coming up with his whole plan and building the gallows, that same night, Achashverosh at home cannot sleep. And in his mind, he's disturbed. What just happened today? His wife just risked her life to come to him and invited him and Haman to a party. Why? She doesn't even tell him why. Maybe something's going on between Haman and Esther. Maybe that's why she invited Haman, and maybe they're planning to kill him. Then he thinks to himself, if Haman or Esther are planning to kill me, I have good friends. Somebody would have told me about it already. Then he says, well, maybe somebody saved my life in the past and I never rewarded them. And so they're not telling me what's going on. So then he says they should read to him from his book of Chronicles, and they read to him that years ago, Mordechai saved Achashverosh's life from Bigsan and Zeresh. He says, great, tomorrow I'm going to honor Mordechai, and everybody will learn what happens to a man that saves the king life. So in case Mordechai is planning on, in case Haman or Esther are planning to kill me, somebody will tell me. And then in the morning, and then he falls asleep, and then he has a dream, and in the dream, Haman is coming with a sword to kill him. And he wakes up from his dream, and they tell him that there's a noise in the hallway. Who is it? It's Haman. And Haman was coming to get permission to hang the man that Achashverosh just decided to honor. Before he has a chance to say anything, Achashverosh asks him, what should I do to a man that a person wants to honor, that the king wants to honor? Haman assumes that he's talking about him, Haman. And so he describes the whole plan: take him on the king's horse and put on the crown and dress him in the king's clothes and parade him in the streets and call out, so should be done to a man that the king wants to honor. Achashverosh says, great plan. Now, when Haman said he thinks this is going to happen to him, and Achashverosh says to him, I want you to go now and do that to Mordechai. Mordechai, the man that Haman just thought he was going to get killed, instead he has to be humiliated and honor him in the streets, and Achashverosh won't let him get out of it. And he has to honor him in the streets. That's happening between party number 1 and party number 2 of Esther and Achashverosh. The next night, which again is Pesach time, that night they have the second party after Haman has been humiliated, and Esther, and after Haman has been humiliated because he had to honor Mordechai in the streets, and there's the whole story of his daughter from the roof throws down garbage on Haman's head because she thinks it's Mordechai, and he's devastated and he's humiliated and he feels terrible, and he goes home and his wife doesn't make him feel any better, because his wife tells him these Jewish people, when they fall until the dust, but when they rise until the stars. If they started rising now, it's not going to be good for you. Haman comes back to that second party with Achashverosh, and Achashverosh says, Esther, what is it that you want? I'll give you anything you want until half my kingdom. Esther says, me and my nation are going to be killed. Somebody wants to kill you, me and my nation. Achashverosh says, who would want to kill my queen? Who wants to kill me, you and your nation? And Esther points to Haman, and she says, Haman, this man wants to kill me. In Achashverosh's head, right away, bells start ringing, because Haman was responsible for killing Vashti. He killed my first wife, now he wants to kill my second wife. Gets really angry. And his anger gets even worse when one of his servants, Chavona, comes in and says to him, you know what else this man did? This man built a gallows to hang. He wanted to hang Mordechai, the man that you just honored today. He wanted to hang him on it. Achashverosh says, great, take him and hang him on that tree. So Haman is then killed. He's hung on that tree that he prepared for Mordechai. Now, most people don't realize it, but it took only 5 days. From when Haman came out with his decree until he was killed was only 5 days. Haman is not killed now, Purim time. Haman is killed Pesach time in Nisan. So now you would think the story is over, but it's not over, because even though Haman is killed, the Jews are still in danger. That decree was already sent out, and the decree says that on Yud Gimel Adar, everybody has permission to kill the Jews. So Mordechai and Esther go to Achashverosh, and they beg him to annul the decree. And he says, I cannot annul the decree, because the decree that was sealed with the ring of the king cannot be annulled. What I can do is give you permission to make any other new decree you want to. So Mordechai and Esther send out a new decree, and the new decree that they send out is that anybody, and the Jews have permission to stand up against anyone that tries to kill them. And on Yud Gimel Adar, they could kill any man, woman, or child that stands up against them. But for 11 months, the Jews are walking around not knowing if they're all going to be annihilated, if there's going to be pogroms, crusades, if there's going to be a genocide, if they're all going to be killed on the 13th day of Adar. Comes the 13th day of Adar, and the miracle is that not one Jew was killed, but the Jews managed to kill out from their enemies anybody that was trying to kill them. In today's day and age, we would say they killed out all the terrorists that were trying to kill them. And they killed out many people that were trying to kill them on the 13th day of Adar. The next day, the 14th day of Adar, became a day of great celebration. Esther asked that the 10 sons of Haman who were killed should be hanged, so everyone sees what happens to people that were killed. And Esther also asked that one city, Shushan, should have permission to fight for one more day, because it was like a hotbed of enemies of the Jews, and there were more enemies there, so please let them fight for one more day. So on the 14th day of Adar, while everybody else was celebrating, Shushan was still fighting, and Shushan celebrated instead on the 15th of Adar. So nowadays, on the 13th day of Adar, we fast to commemorate that war that the Jews had with their enemies, that enabled them to win. So we're fasting nowadays on Yud Gimel Adar. It's called Tanis Esther. We're fasting because our people are fighting and we want them to be successful. So anyone that's not fighting fasts. So nowadays we all fast. It's a spiritual war nowadays, but by now there's a physical war going on also. So our fasting should also be in the merit of all the people that are actually fasting, that are actually fighting. On the 14th day of Adar, we celebrate because the Jews celebrated then, and we're still celebrating today because of the victory of good over bad. Because Shushan didn't celebrate until the 15th, we also have Shushan Purim, when we celebrate to remember the miracle of what happened in Shushan. Cities that have a wall from the days of Yehoshua ben Nun celebrate on the 15th of Adar. So a city like Jerusalem celebrates actually on the 15th, not on the 14th. Today, this year, the 13th of Adar, Purim falls out on Sunday, which would be the 14th of Adar. And that's when we're celebrating. The 13th of Adar, the day when we would normally fast, falls out on Shabbos. We're not allowed to fast on Shabbos. The only fast that we fast on Shabbos is Yom Kippur. We can't fast on Shabbos. So the Chachamim pushed it backwards. They can't push it forwards because Sunday is Purim. So they push it backwards. But they don't want to push it to Friday because Friday is Erev Shabbos. So we're fasting Tanis Esther on this year. It's not the 13th of Adar, but it's on Thursday. It's tomorrow, to remember the fast that the Jews had then. And we should have in mind those of us that are fasting, those of us that aren't fasting, that are giving tzedakah. We should have in mind everybody that is fighting, that they shall be successful. And on the 14th of Adar, which is Sunday, we will celebrate Purim. In the Megillah, it tells us how to celebrate Purim. The way to celebrate Purim is by re-listening or rereading the story of the Megillah. Esther requested from our sages that on every year, the Megillah should be recorded, and every year it should be read. And because of Esther's request, every year one of our mitzvahs of Purim are to read the Megillah. Everybody should try and make the effort to hear the Megillah Saturday night, and again Sunday. Twice. We hear it at night and we hear it by day. On Sunday, it's also a mitzvah to give mishloach manot, which is 2 foods to at least 1 person, and matanot le'avyonim, which is gifts to the poor, at least 2 poor people, and to have a su'udah, to have a meal. If you think about the mitzvahs of Purim, they're all very physical, really. They're all very mundane. They're actually all things that we do every day. We eat every day. We share food. We give charity. But Purim is really about the physical. Haman wanted to destroy the physical Jews, the body of the people. Esther saved the Jews by physically going to Achashverosh and pleading for the Jewish people. And we celebrate it by physically taking physical things and doing mitzvahs with them. Because Purim is not so much about the victory of the spirituality as much as the victory of the physical. That as physical Jews, we prevail. As physical people, we prevail. And as physical people, we're here in this world to make this world a godly place. So that's what Purim is all about. So now, that was all an introduction to talk about Esther, because we said we were going to talk about what could we learn from Esther. So who is Esther? So just a general idea, Megillah Esther is not a history book. Megillah Esther is a book of Tanakh. It has an interesting story. It has a really good plot. Even kindergarten children like to listen to the story of Purim. It is a really good story, but there's so much more in it. In general, Torah is called Milashon Hora'ah. Torah is from lessons. We can't just learn the Torah as a history book, but we have to take lessons from the story. And like we said, from Esther, from the story of Esther, there's so much that's relevant and so much that we could learn from her. So I'm going to try and pick what I could of what we could learn from Esther. And the Megillah is called Megillas Esther. Megillah means a scroll of Esther, but Megillah in Hebrew, every Hebrew word is not by accident. Megillah comes from the word Giloi, which means reveal, and Esther comes from the word hidden. The whole Megillah is full of hidden things. It was a hidden miracle. God's name is not mentioned once in the Megillah. Esther hid her nationality. There's a lot of hiddenness, secret in the Megillah, and Megillah Esther really reveals that which is hidden. There's so much to reveal underneath that which is hidden. So, who's Esther? Her background is significant, her life is significant, her message is significant. Her background is she was born an orphan. Her father died before she was born. Her mother died at childbirth. By the time she was born, she had no parents. She comes from the family of King Saul, the first king of the Jewish people. She comes from the tribe of Benjamin, and she could trace herself back to Rachel. Of the 4 mothers, there's Rachel and Leah and Bilhah and Zilpah, Yaakov's wives. She comes from Rachel. Her background, like all of our backgrounds, are not insignificant. Everything in our background forms who we are. In her background, she came from Rachel. One of the things we know about Rachel is that Rachel was supposed to marry Yaakov. And at the last minute, Lavan switched things around and put Rachel's sister Leah in her place. Yaakov and Rachel knew that Lavan was a tricky person. And so Yaakov and Leah made up a set of signs with each other so they would know that it was actually Rachel. When Rachel saw that Leah was being taken to marry Yaakov, she felt bad for her sister who would be humiliated in public. So she gave her signs to Leah, and she didn't speak up. She didn't say that it was Leah that's being taken and not Rachel. That self-control in speech, that not speaking up, is always to her credit. And it's always, whenever we talk about Rachel, we talk about how Rachel had tremendous self-control in what she didn't say. She gave that strength of not speaking when you shouldn't to her descendants. And King Saul is known also for not speaking at times. And Esther got this attribute of not speaking up, of being quiet, of being discreet, of not revealing that which we don't have to know. And she also excelled in that being quiet, in that she, no matter how much pressure Achashverosh put on her, for 5 years, she doesn't reveal who she is to him. It's just interesting. I teach Megillah in high school, and after I finish teaching each parak, I ask them what they learned from the parak. And of all the lessons that I talk about, this aspect of not speaking when you shouldn't is often the lesson that the girls choose. It's interesting to me, and I think it's because we live in a society where people speak much too much, where everything is there to share and to be out in the open. And as Jewish people, we know that that's not really the way it is. We're tzenuim, we're modest, we're private. We don't speak up everything. The whole idea of modesty is a big fundamental part of every Jew. By the way, it's not just women, and men and women both. We have this attribute of tznius, and that's something that we could learn from Esther, and is something that's very missing in today's society. Anyhow, she comes from Rachel, we said. We said she comes from Shaul. One of the things we know about Shaul HaMelech is that he was the first king of the Jewish people, King Saul. He was the first king of the Jewish people, and he was a good man, but he did one wrong thing. God told him to destroy the entire Amalek evil that keeps coming back in our history, always out there to get us. And he almost did. He destroyed the entire nation of Amalek except for a few sheep. He wanted to save the sheep to bring them as sacrifices to thank God. He left alive the king because he wanted the king to see what happened to his whole people. So the prophet Samuel came to him the next day and he said to him, "What did you do? Why didn't you kill them all out?" He said, "I did, except for a few sheep. I want to bring them as sacrifices." Shmuel Hanavi says to him, Samuel the prophet says to him, "It's better to listen to God than to bring sacrifices." In other words, don't make your own decisions. God said, kill Amalek, you're supposed to kill out the entire Amalek. And Shmuel Hanavi himself killed the king Agag the next day. But because Agag was left alive just that one extra day, he was with a woman that night in jail. And although he was killed, the seed of Amalek was not. And from that woman eventually came out Haman. So ultimately, King Saul was responsible for Haman coming into this world. And therefore, Esther, as a descendant of Shaul, Esther and Mordechai, their cousins, both as descendants of Shaul, they have to correct what Shaul did wrong. So she comes from Shaul, which is significant. And we said she comes from Binyamin. Binyamin comes from the tribe of Binyamin. We know about Binyamin that he was the youngest of all the tribes. And after Yosef, his brother, was born, Yaakov leaves Lavan's house and he goes back to meet Esau. And when they meet, Yaakov and all his children bow down to Esau. So when Mordechai now refuses to bow down, Esau says to him, "Why don't you bow down? Your ancestor bowed down to, your grandfather bowed to my grandfather, because Yaakov had bowed to Esau." So Mordechai said, "I come from Binyamin." And Binyamin didn't bow down. Binyamin was not born yet. So when they met, Binyamin was the only one of the tribes that didn't bow to Esau. And God watched over that he shouldn't bow down, because in Binyamin's portion, the temple will be rebuilt, is going to reside in Binyamin's portion. Esther and Mordechai come from Binyamin. They come from that stock of people that don't bow to Esau's. They remain strong and steadfast and don't bow to Esau. So that's where Esther's background. They also mentioned that she she became queen over 127 countries. Even that number is not insignificant. 127 is known as the years that Sarah lived. Sarah lived for 100, our matriarch Sarah lived for 127 years. Esther merited to rule over 127 countries in the merit of Sarah, who lived for 127 years, her great-grandmother, which shows us that she's connected to Sarah. She's like Sarah. And the Megillah starts off that way by telling us she don't think wasn't a great woman. She was on the level of Sarah. It also shows us that Sarah's good 127 years did something for her descendants many years later, that she ruled over 127 countries. So all of our actions affect our descendants and are affected by our ancestors. She's called Hadassah. Hadassah is a euphemism for tzaddikus. She was a very righteous woman. We know about Hadassah that they smell sweet and they taste bitter. She knew how to be sweet to Mordechai and bitter to Haman. We have to learn that quality too. It's not good to be sweet to everyone. There are some people that you have to be harsh with and tough with. And we all know about that today. We can't be kind to people that are cruel. We have to be cruel to people that are cruel. A hadassah is one of those plants that survives in the summer and in the winter. Most plants die in the winter time. A hadassah is one of those plants that lives in the summer and in the winter. She managed to be a tzaddikus, not just when it was easy, but also when it was hard. And again, we could learn from Esther this idea of it's easy to be good when we're in an easy situation, but even in challenging times, to be good, to want to do the right things. Even in the palace, she did the right things. She's called Esther because she hid her words. Again, the idea of not saying everything we don't have to. She's raised by her cousin Mordechai, who is beautiful. She marries Mordechai. And then Achashverosh is seeking a new queen, collects beautiful woman, and she's taken. She doesn't want to be there. We learn from Esther bitachon. Bitachon means trust. When she's taken to Achashverosh, she feels awful. She does not want to be there. Mordechai says to her, it's impossible that God would allow a righteous woman like you be taken to be to this non-Jew, unless something great has to happen through you. God must have put you here for a reason. And so she trusts that. And it's easy to trust that for a little while, but it takes a very long time, 5 years or 6 years, until she discovers why she had to be queen. But she lives with trust. God wouldn't put me here for no reason. And every day she's reminding herself that I'm here for a reason. I don't know what the reason is, but I'm here for a reason. When Mordechai tells her that the Jews are in danger, she and he both teach us how we have to react to a problem. We don't react to a problem by immediately, our first reaction has to be knowing why this happened. It happened because we weakened our relationship to Hashem. So before we do anything else, we have to fix our relationship with Hashem. We have to make ourselves stronger in our relationship with Hashem, and then we could make a physical attempt to fix the problem. So when Mordechai heard that the Jews were in danger, his first reaction was to put on sackcloth and ashes and to scream and to cry and to rouse the Jews to do tshuva. When Esther heard, and then he went to Esther. When he told Esther to go to Achashverosh, she said, first, gather the Jews and fast. Gather them because they're not united. Gather them together, unite them. Fast because they went to a party and they ate there for 6 days and nights. So for 6 days, so now you have to fast for 3 days and nights to make up for the party. They both knew we have to first spiritually make ourselves stronger, reconnect with Hashem, and then Hashem will take care of us. Then she could go to Achashverosh. And in fact, when Esther says to Achashverosh, when Esther says to Mordechai, I'm going to go fast for 3 days and nights, she says, I and my girls will also fast. Now, you would think that would be counterintuitive. She's going to Achashverosh to beg for the Jewish people. She knows that Achashverosh likes her because she's beautiful. Fasting for 3 days and nights is not going to make her look very beautiful when she goes to Achashverosh. But she knew that that's not really the main point. The main point is that God should be on her side. If God will be on her side, he'll already make her mission to Achashverosh successful. He'll make her Achashverosh like what she looks like, whether she's fasting or she's not fasting. The main thing is first we have to correct our relationship with Hashem. Another thing we could learn from Esther is knowing if something comes our way and there's something to do, maybe this is the reason why we are in this particular place at this particular time. Maybe this is our mission in life. Maybe this is what we have to do. In fact, Mordecai told her, if you don't save the Jewish people, then help and salvation will come to the Jewish people from somewhere else, but you and your family will be lost. And one of the explanations of that is if you don't help the Jewish people now, whenever an opportunity comes to us to do something, if we don't do it, help will come from somewhere else. But you and your family will lose out on any brachos and any merits that you could get from doing a particular thing. We learn from Esther determination to do Torah and mitzvahs. She was in a place where nobody knew that she was Jewish. She was in a place where it would be, no one can know that she's Jewish. And it's very hard to keep Torah and mitzvahs in general in an unfriendly environment. How much more so if they're not supposed to know she's Jewish, but she was determined. She was determined to keep Shabbos. She was determined to keep kosher. She was determined to keep all the basics that a Jewish woman has to do. And she prevailed. She managed somehow to keep those mitzvahs. In fact, it says that Ritzon Yireyav Yasef, a person really wants badly enough to keep Torah and mitzvahs, God enables them to do it. God helped her out. God made it that Hagar should give her 7 girls. And with that, she could keep track of the 7 days of the week. Each girl came a different day. And that's how she was able to keep track of when Shabbos was. God helped that the clothing she got didn't have shatnez in it. God helped that the food she got, somehow she was able to get seeds or something to survive on, so she was able to keep kosher also. If we want to keep Torah mitzvahs badly enough, Hashem will help you. We learn from Esther that miracles could be dressed in nature. Sometimes it doesn't have to be this big, tremendous miracle. It could be in concealed underneath. And that could be the miracle. And it could be just as powerful as a big miracle that looks so supernatural. It could, in this case, it changed from one extreme to the other, from a day of completely being annihilated to totally and completely not joy instead. We learn the power of Torah and Tefillah and Tshuva from the story of Esther, from the davening that was done, from the davening of, I'm going quickly now because I see the time is late, but I'm just going to mention some more things that we learned from all the 22,000 children that davened, from Mordecai's names, the parents, the father and the grandfather and the great-grandfather all reflect the great davening that he did. We learned the power of Mesiras Nefesh, of doing things, risking our life. In Esther's case, she risked her life. She also gave up on her marriage to Mordecai, doing things that are not comfortable for us in order to save the Jewish people. We learned that hidden in the deepest pain sometimes could be the seeds of the Yeshua. We learned that we could fix a mistake by counteracting it. So she gathered the Jewish people to counteract the fact that they were not ba'achtos. They fasted to counteract for the fact that they ate by the party. In general, we learned that hiddenness is a good thing a lot from the Megillah. And brachas sometimes come on things that are hidden from the eye. Sometimes the greatest accomplishments are kept secret. Esther behind the scenes changed the world. Hiddenness sometimes can accomplish more. Concealment, discretion, not shouting out there to the world, not putting everything on social media sometimes can accomplish a lot more than when we're putting everything out there for everybody to see. Believe in your own hidden powers. We could see when everything looked dark and Hashem's protection of the Jewish people was in hiding, her actions ultimately saved the Jewish people. We too could tap into our own hidden powers and transform events. We learn it's the story of Jewish pride, of Gaon Yaakov, of being proud to be Jewish even in places where it's really challenging. We learn for sure from the Megillah, the story, the significance of Hashgacha Pratis, how every single event in the story seems so disconnected, and yet they were all connected. They all had what to do with each other. We learned the power of children, pure neshamas. It was the children that their cries reached the heavens and made Hashem change his mind. It was the children's faith that made Mordecai believe that everything will be okay, everything will be fine. And that education of young is so important. Haman recognized this too, and Haman said, I'm going to kill the children first, because he saw how the children were the key to the Jewish future. We learn Avas Yisrael about caring for other people, how much Esther cared for other people, how much she gave up on it. And Avas Yisrael brings the Geula. So, ladies, we have an Esther who empowered us. Esther really teaches us the power of the Jewish woman, how each and every one of us has the ability to take darkness and to turn it into light, to take tragedy and turn it into joy, to take sadness and to turn it into happiness like Esther did. And it could happen in 1 minute just by using all of our hidden powers and all of the strength that we have from Esther. I just want to end off by saying that Purim seems like a fun holiday, and it definitely is. And the mitzvah of Purim is joy, is to be happy. But don't let that trick you into thinking that Purim is not a holy day. Purim is on the level of Yom Kippur. What we accomplish on Purim through joy, we accomplish on Yom Kippur through tshuva and through fasting, etc. Purim has connections to Matan Torah, to the giving of the Torah. It's connected to Yom Kippur. It's connected to the times of Mashiach. It's a holy holiday that's dressed in the mundane, because that's our purpose as people, to bring spirituality to the mundane. And Purim is actually stressing that aspect. So celebrate it. The joy is going to change everything around. Any Amalek is going to be destroyed through our joy. And celebrate it the way the Torah tells us to celebrate it, with hearing the Megillah and giving Mishloach Manos and Matanot Lavyonim and having a meal. And God willing, we're going to go from the Geula of Purim to the Geula of Pesach to the Geula Hasidah to the Geula in the future, the complete redemption of Mashiach. I want to just end off by saying that the end of the Megillah, the last few psukim, emphasize shalom, peace. It says that Mordechai taught divrei shalom ve'emes. It says the last words of the Megillah are Dover. Mordechai was Dover shalom l'chol zaro. He spoke peace to all of his children. So through our good mitzvahs that we'll do, through the power of the Jewish women, through the power of Purim, the power of Esther, and the power of Mordechai, we're going to accomplish that there'll be peace in this world and peace in the world, and there'll be shleimus haaretz. The land will be complete, the people will be complete, and the world will be complete, and Mashiach will come. God bless you all. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Wow, that was incredible. And we really see that it's not just a history book. We're living everything that happened in the story of the Megillah. And there's so many examples that came to mind, which we'll talk about it later on in the class. But a question did come on. Why did Esther decide to make a party with King Ahasuerus instead of making going for a walk, a stroll? Like why a party?
It's a good question. In general, parties is a big theme in the Megillah. If you count the number of parties in the Megillah, there's about 10 parties in the Megillah. It does discuss in the Gemara why she partied and why she invited Haman to that party, why she needed him too. One of the explanations that I remember offhand is that the God often punishes his enemies while they're partying, like Belshazzar was punished while he was partying, so Haman would get killed while he's partying. There were reasons why she had Haman there specifically. There's a whole discussion in the Gemara with like 15 different reasons why. But one of the things that Esther was doing was procrastinating. She didn't, when Ahasuerus asked her what she wanted, she could have said it right then, but she didn't. She said, come to a party tonight. And then when he came to the party that night, he said, come to a party tomorrow night. And she doesn't say right away what she wants. And the reason why she's procrastinating is because she's not sure that the Jews' tshuva has been accepted yet. She told them to fast for 3 days and nights. She told them to gather. And she knows that it's Hashem forgiving them that's going to make this all successful. She doesn't want to ask Ahasuerus to save the Jewish people or to kill Haman until she gets a sign that their tshuva has been accepted. Between the first party and the second party, she got her sign. Because when Haman had to honor Mordechai in the streets, that was a sign to her that things changed around and now everything will be okay. When she saw Mordechai being honored by Haman on the streets, she knew that their tshuva has been accepted.
Good answer. Another question came in, if you could expand a little bit more about Esther's son. That Esther had a son?
It's a little bit of a mystery because the son is not mentioned anywhere in the Megillah. The Megillah does not talk about them having a child. However, most Gemara Medrashim will tell you there is a man named Daryavish who allows a king named Daryavish who allows the Jews. He's the one that gives the Jews permission shortly after the Megillah about if the miracle of Purim was in 3404 and in 348, so 4 years later or 3 or 4 years later, he allows the Jews to build the Beis HaMikdash, and he is the king after Achashverosh. Most people say that he was the son of Esther and Achashverosh, and he was quite young. He has to be, if you do the math, he was quite young when he became king, and he was the one that allowed the Jews to build the Beis HaMikdash. I don't know much more about him than that.
Okay, so we have another question that came in. It seems the relationship between Mordechai and Esther is deliberate, but if we say that she was married to Mordechai, there are two problems. Please, if she knows how to resolve, she would not have been a virgin when she married King Achashverosh, and
the first, I only got the first question down. The question is, it was deliberately ambiguous. And how do we explain the fact that they only, they were asking all the virgins to come, and she would not have been a virgin if she'd gone and had been married to Mordecai?
It's a good question, asked by all the commentaries, and it's actually answered in the Megillah, because when the boys give Achashverosh this whole idea of this beauty contest, their suggestion is to collect unmarried women, beautiful unmarried women. When Esther is chosen, the wording in the pasuk is Vayev hamelech es Esther mikol hanashim vatisachen v'chesed lefanav mikol hapsulos, which means he liked her more than all the unmarried girls. No, he liked her more than all the women, and she carried favor and kindness before him from all the unmarried girls. The commentaries over there all explain that although the original plan was to take unmarried girls, at some point he changed his plan and he started taking nashim, married women also. So that would explain how Esther would have been taken, being a married woman. Doesn't reflect well on Achashverosh, but the more you study the Megillah, the more you see Achashverosh was not a very good person.
another point I just want to, maybe you could expand on, when it says that everyone was able to come to the party and act how they wanted. Is that right? So Vashti didn't want to come to the party, but it said that the reason why she was killed was not because he wanted to kill her. It was more that the advisors advised King Achashverosh, if you don't do something about this, then all of our wives are going to defy us in the future. So it was more like a lesson. If you could expand more on that.
So it's pretty complex. Basically, when Achashverosh called Vashti to come, Vashti doesn't just refuse. She gets, I guess, embarrassed. There are different opinions why she refuses to come, what happened to her, but God made her not look very pretty. Whatever reason it was, whatever circumstance happened, and she's embarrassed, so she's not coming out. God wanted her to be punished that day. That day was, besides being the 7th day of the party, it was Shabbos, and she was a cruel woman. She used to make the Jewish girls work on Shabbos, so God wanted her to be punished that day on Shabbos, so he made her, things happen to her, so that she would refuse, so that she would be killed on Shabbos. But when she refuses to come, she doesn't just refuse, she sends back insulting words to Achashverosh. Achashverosh wasn't born into royalty. He became a king, so she starts insulting him. You're a stable boy and you don't know how to drink, and when you drink, you can't hold on your wine. So she publicly humiliates Achashverosh. Being that she publicly humiliates Achashverosh, he gets insulted. And if a king is insulted, so then she should be killed. But on the other hand, she's his wife. He doesn't want to kill her. So remember, he's drunk also. So on one hand, he wants to kill her. On the other hand, he doesn't want to kill her. And he actually goes to different people to get advice. First, he goes to the Jewish Chachamim, actually. But they're smart enough to not answer him because they know whatever they're going to answer won't be good. If you answer to kill her, he'll get upset tomorrow. If you answer not to kill her, he'll get upset today. So they say, go ask somebody else. Don't ask us. Then he asks other advisors, and they're also quiet. They're also smart enough not to speak up. Haman does speak up because he personally hates Vashti. There are different opinions why he speaks up. One is they say she had once slapped him in his face with her shoe, so he hates her. And it's a good chance to take revenge. Another answer is that he was insulted because Vashti had made a party and she didn't invite his wife. And a third reasoning behind his speaking up is actually because he wanted his daughter to become the next queen. So he says to Achashverosh to convince him to kill Vashti, that you have to kill her, because if you don't kill her, all the women in the kingdom are going to learn to not listen to their wives. And in his drunken state, that made sense to Achashverosh, and he agreed, and he had her killed. But remember, behind all this, God wanted her killed that day. So Achashverosh, in his drunken state, agreed to something that didn't make too much sense, and it all worked out because that's the way God wanted it to happen. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just unmuting. We have two questions that came in, and then we have someone that wants to ask a question. So give me a moment. I'm just going to pull it up. Okay. Did Mordecai divorce Esther before she was taken or after? Why didn't she die al Kiddush Hashem?
So that's a complex question that's discussed in the commentaries. One answer that's given is that Esther, there are different answers given, but I'll just give you one of them now. Esther, the halacha is that if a woman goes to be with another man, that's Gilei Arayos, you're not allowed to do that. And if you do that, you're not allowed to go back to your husband. Esther, unless the one exception to that is if a woman is forced to be with another man. If a man forces a woman to be with her, she's allowed to go back to her husband. She's in a category of what's called anusa, forced, and she's allowed to go back to her husband. Esther, when she went to Achashverosh, was in the category of an anusa. She was forced to be with Achashverosh, and therefore she halachically was allowed to stay married to Mordecai. They didn't have to divorce because she didn't go willingly to Achashverosh, she was forced. And if you don't have to divorce, you don't divorce because marriage is holy. Until the day when Mordecai told her, go to Achashverosh to save the people. She says, if I go to Achashverosh to save the people, now I'm going not according to the law of the Torah, because now I'm going willingly. And if I go willingly to Achashverosh, then I could no longer go back to you, because now I'm going willingly. So now according to the Torah, I'll be forbidden. And she actually had to give up on her marriage to Mordecai because she went to save the Jewish people.
Okay, so we have another question. How is a king so familiar with the kosher food, and what did they do over Shabbat without the Mishkan?
About the Mishkan?
I think that's what it said. Oh, we'll do the first part of the question.
Okay, I did not say that Achashverosh was familiar with kosher food. I said that God made it possible for her to keep kosher in the palace. Even though nobody knew that she was Jewish, she somehow got food that she was able to eat. What that food was, there's different versions. Some say that she got kosher food. maybe, I don't know, from a kosher store or a kosher caterer or something. It just happened to work out. Some say that she ate vegetables. Some say she ate seeds in the palace to keep her going. She found food that she was able to eat that was kosher that kept her going. And that might be the reasoning behind the tradition to eat poppy seed hamantashen on Purim, is to remember the seeds that Esther ate in the palace.
Do we know what happened to the things from the Beis HaMikdash that he put out today, where it is?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. No, because it's very interesting. We have a very interesting question, and I'm gonna just ask Toby to unmute yourself to ask it, so it could be in your words.
Hi again. Thank you for allowing me to ask another question, and it's a bit complicated. I'm hoping that Mrs. Gansbourg can shed light on this, because I've learned at different times about the background and the lineage of Esther, and the fact that she comes from the tribe of Binyamin. So first of all, it's clear if you look at the section regarding Yosef in Egypt, there are so many hints and wording that is exactly referring, whatever appears in the section with Yosef appears in the Megillah, the way that they go before him and they dress him in the clothes of the Melech and the chariot, and they call before him of Brech, and the colors and everything. There's so many hints and allusions to what will happen later in the Megillah, or the Megillah harkens back to Yosef. Yosef is, I don't know if he's a direct ancestor, but they're both from the tribe of, they're both from Rachel,
True.
right?
Yes.
Yosef and Esther, they're both called Yefei Toar. And there's something going on with this tribe of Binyamin, and I think the story of Esther somehow also comes as a tikkun for the transgressions of Binyamin, or I don't know enough. I'm just asking if you have heard anything in that regard. And also, sorry, I'm sorry, I'm blanking out, but maybe you could just address that.
So I don't know what you're referring to when you're saying the tikkun of
Well,
Binyamin. I'm not sure, but I'll tell you what I do know.
but
What
can I just say that the whole situation with Pilegesh Bagiva, the concubine on Giva, and also there's something else that Binyamin did that escapes me right now. And they did, as far as I understand, they participated in Chet HaEgal. So anyway, but that particularly the parsha with the concubine and Giva.
So honestly, I don't know of any. It's interesting question, and I don't know anything about it. I can't tell you that. What I could tell you, the only part that I could tell you something that I do know about is you mentioned before about Yosef. And Yosef and Mordechai, there are a lot of similarities that the Gemara points out. The Gemara points out the fact that they both were tested similarly, Yosef and Mordechai. Yosef was tested day after day by the wife of Potiphar who tried to seduce him. And Mordechai was tested day after day by the Avdei HaMelech, by the servants of the king who were trying to get him to bow down. It also says that they had similar honors. Mordechai was honored in the streets. Yosef was honored in the streets. Mordechai was second to the king at some point, and Yosef was. Mordechai got a ring from the king, and Yosef got a ring from the king. They rode Yosef in the streets, and they called out Avrech before him, and they rode Yosef, and they rode Mordechai in the streets, and they called out So they both had similar things, and we keep seeing connections to Yosef and to what happened to Yosef and to Mordechai in the Megillah. Now, Mordechai and Esther did not come from Yosef. They both came from Rachel. Yosef and Binyamin both came from Rachel, but they didn't come from Yosef. But there are parallels brought to Mordechai and Yosef. As far as Binyamin, they did come from the tribe of Binyamin. And what I did read is that in order to fight Esav, it says a child of Rachel, a child of Esav always falls into the hand of a child of Rachel. So over here, Esav over here is Haman, because Haman comes from Amalek. Amalek, the person, was a grandson of Esav. He came from Eliphaz, who came from Esav. And so in order to fight Haman, you need a child of Rachel. And the child of Rachel would be Mordechai and Esther, who came from Binyamin. They're the ones that are going to be effective in fighting Binyamin. And the other thing that I mentioned, that Mordechai didn't bow down, like his grandfather Binyamin was the one that didn't bow down. So those are connections that I know to Binyamin. This part about a tikkun, I don't know enough about it to answer that.
Okay, thanks so much. We have two more questions. So someone asked, why did Esther have to stay married to Achashverosh even after the story of Purim?
So now I'm answering only not what I saw in the commentaries. This is just my guess. When Achashverosh died, Daryavish was 6 years old. When he allowed the Jews to build the Beis Hamikdash, he was 8 years old. My assumption is that Daryavish in the palace needed his mother behind him to make these kind of decisions. But that's just my assumption. That's not that I read that someplace. I'm just assuming that.
Amazing. Fran's going to ask a quick question, and then we're going to conclude with our roll call, and we have a video, and then we're going to have a short for bring in to talk about different examples that's not going to be recorded of what we see today in our days with stories that are in the media today that's known, that really connects to the Megillah. Just one thing about like that you were answering the question about Tikkun and how I really do believe, and it's known that our generation has the hardest time from all the generations, because we have to fix all the things from the past in order for Mashiach to come. And that's why everyone's going through so much in their lives, I believe. And we are going to get it done, and we have to get it done. And we have to fix what, we don't know. We don't know everything, but we just know that we have to follow what the Torah says. And if we have to kill out Amalek, we have to kill out Amalek. Like, there's no questions asked. There's no time to be compassionate. And I loved what you said about Esther, how, there was a time when she was a very nice person, but she was also a strong person. So she knew where she should focus on her energy of her kindness, and know where to emphasize her strengths that Hashem gave her on the people that really needed it. And also, I loved what you said about, not everything has to be said. I thought that was such an amazing lesson for us today, because in today's generation, everything is said. We're tested with social media, we're tested with podcasts, and everyone just, feels like they have to put everything out there. But once it's out there, it's out there. And we need to act smart, and really think before we do things. And I thought that was such an incredible lesson from Esther and so many more. So thank you, Mrs. Gansbourg. I love that. I'm just going to ask Fran to unmute herself quickly before we.
I have. Good evening, Mrs. Gansbourg. I just wanted to let you know that Ellen Cameras, who is the sponsor of this evening's program, has just thanked you through me, and for such a lovely evening. My question, which kind of came out earlier, sadly is more transactional than spiritual, which we've just been going through. As you recall, we know from the Purim story that at the very beginning, King Ahasuerus had, I think you said maybe it was a 6-day party, then it was a 6-month party. And we know that the Israelites came, some of them, really just went wild and didn't eat kosher food. But there was, I thought last year, or maybe there was something in the text that said there was kosher food if the Jews wanted it or not. And so my question back a couple of minutes ago was not really about Esther keeping kosher, but how would King Ahasuerus know enough about kosher food and its preparation or whatever to have been able to provide that choice? And then part two, which is maybe better, more important, is how did it, during that party or the 6 months party, how did the Jews observe Shabbat, or did they not the entire time?
Okay, great questions. So the first one about the kosher food, yes, Achashverosh made his party kirtzon ish ve'ish, the pasuk says, which means that everybody should get whatever they wanted. And he made sure that there would also be kosher food if anybody asked for kosher food. And in fact, we learn from that, from the fact that people did ask for kosher food, that even if you're in an environment where it's not such a friendly environment and where they're out to get you, or it's a challenging environment, we still ask for the kosher food. We still insist on doing things right. And they did get kosher food. How Achashverosh knew, I don't know. I'm imagining it was like, nowadays you can get airline, those kosher food on the airline. I would imagine that he was able to get from a kosher store if they needed kosher food. He was able to get somehow some kosher food. I don't know that it was the best kosher food, but he had also kosher food available to them. That's just my imagination. That's as far as that's concerned. The other question that you asked about Shabbat is an interesting question. Now, the Jews were not at that 6-month party. The 6-month party was the first party, and that party was just for the dignitaries, just for the government officials, just for the, nowadays we would say the senators and the governors and the mayors and the kings and the sheikhs and that kind of thing. It was just for those people. It wasn't for the common people. The Jews were invited to the second party, which was for 7 days. At that party, all the common people were invited, including the Jews. And their intention was to get the Jews to come and participate in that party. Now, the party was for 7 days. That means one of the days of the week was Shabbat. Interestingly, at least one of the commentaries that I saw said that the Jews went for 6 days and did not go on Shabbat. So they only attended 6 of the 7 days. Shabbat was Shabbat. They were Jewish people. They were observant people. They actually felt like the party was taking place in a garden, and it's difficult to eat in a garden because you might spill liquids and might make the grass grow. And so people generally on Shabbat, if they're very scrupulous, they don't eat over in gardens and things like that for that reason. And so they decided to stay home on Shabbat. And in fact, the Megillah says, the Hebrew words are B'yom Hashvi Ketov Lev HaMelach B'yayin. On the 7th day, when the king's heart was good with wine. Now that was the 7th day of the party. It was also the 7th day of the week. It was Shabbat. Achashverosh's heart was good with wine. Means Achashverosh got drunk. And that's when he decided to call Vashti. But there's an interesting side rule that I didn't mention this time. I probably mentioned it before, that whenever it says the king in the Megillah, not King Achashverosh, but the king, it's actually Esther's and Mordechai's way of hinting to Hashem also. So, and the 7th day on Shabbat, when the king's heart was good with wine, was talking also about how God's heart felt good with the wine of the Jewish people, because he looked at the contrast of the Jews and the non-Jews on that day of Shabbat. On that day of Shabbat, the Jews were gathering and eating and drinking, and the non-Jews were gathering and eating and drinking. And the non-Jews were busy discussing who has a more beautiful wife. My wife, her wife, his wife, whatever. And that's how it evolved that Vashti was called. The Jews, on the other hand, were also eating and drinking. And what do Jewish people do when they eat and drink on Shabbat? They say Divrei Torah. They say a Dvar Torah. They were saying words of Torah. So on the seventh day, on Shabbat, when God's heart felt good with the wine of Torah, with the wine of Dvar Torahs that the Jews were saying, he made this whole story happen. So according to that opinion, at least, the Jews did not go on Shabbat. And in fact, later on, when Esther tells them to fast, she tells them to fast for 3 days and 3 nights to atone for the 6 days that they went to the party. 6 days, not 7, because they didn't go on the 7th day.
Wow. Thank you, Mrs. Gansbourg. I want to thank you so much for being here tonight and fitting it into your schedule and always wanting to help with this class. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
I believe in your class. I think that you're doing great things with it, and all you ladies are great for getting together every week to learn. And I wish I had the willpower to tune in every week, but life is busy, but you people are doing it and you're amazing, and keep it up, because you're
Thank
going to
you.
bring Mashiach.
Wow. I hope we'll bring we will bring Mashiach. We will. We all will. 100%.
Amen.
So thank you. So I just want to give a little shout out who was on tonight. But before I do, I want to give a couple of thank yous. I firstly want to thank the Rebbe and Hashem and the Rebbe for giving me the opportunity for doing this class, because it's a gift. Everything we have, all the opportunities that come our way, yes, we have to work on it, and yes, we have to make it happen. But there's a seed that's planted, and it comes from above. So I'm very honored and humbled. I want to say thank you to Shandy Jacobson, my mentor of this class, my mashpia for the class. Thank you so much for always being there and being such a big support in so many ways. I want to thank all the ambassadors of the class. Today, you all can become an ambassador. It's so easy. It's a click of a button. You just message me, you'd like to become an ambassador, and you share the class with your friends and your loved ones and your chats. And you can also have the merits of spreading light into the world. So consider that. I want to thank all the participants of the class, and I want to thank my dear husband that helps me weekly, goes above and beyond on his, he's busy, and he posts the link on the YouTube channel and helps me with the text. So I'm so grateful and thankful to that, and honored that all of you were on tonight. So tonight we had Ottawa, we had Baltimore, we had Brooklyn Heights, we had Philadelphia, we had Cedarhurst, we have Crown Heights, Toronto, Long Beach, California, we had Mexico City, LA, California, Far Rockaway, Charlotte, North Carolina, Flatbush, Boston, Massachusetts. Those are all the people that listed on the chat. Thank you. And for all those that are waiting for the recording, we're going to send it out the next day. So I'm going to now conclude with a video of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. It's incredible. He talks about Purim. It's an 8-minute video. I consider staying on because it's so incredible, and it's living with our times today, even though it was so many years ago. So I am going to share the screen. I'm going to ask everyone if they can stay muted. And then after, we are going to have, followed by a Hasidic gathering, a Farbrengen, the power of a Farbrengen. And we're going to do that in merit that the hostage should come home immediately. And all the people that we're praying for should have refuah shlemas. And of course, Mashiach should come. We also have South Africa. So on tonight. Welcome, welcome. So give me a moment while I pull up the screen. Hold on just one moment. I think I have to open it again and share it again. Give me a second while I do that because it timed out. I'm not so techy, but it's funny because God gave me the opportunity to share tech. So just give me 30 seconds while I pull it up again. It's worth it.
Wenn du gehst zum Mifza Purim, sei do, sei bchol mokim shuhu, man soll sich hereinwerfen in der Hachonis zu dem Mifza Purim, wie man da von der Hachonis Lifnisse. Allahs kam wie kam, man soll sein, bei jeder Jiden und bei allen Jiden, soll sein der Inne von Mischleach Mones Ischle Jehu, und Matones Loavjeni, und wir haben meiste Hura Yiker, a jeder soll tun in die in Jonim, wo beim Jucha der Mifza Purim mit den ganzen Sturim.
It was in the early 60s. The Rebbe demanded that Mishleach Mones should be reached to maximum amount of people to encourage them to give Mishleach Mones Matonis Lavyeni. The Rebbe always demanded that every activity that was done should be publicized to maximum amount. My father was thinking how we can reach maximum amount of people. So he hired a plane to fly over many cities in Eretz Yisrael with throwing down notes to encourage people to send Mishleach Mones and Matanis Lavyeni in the mitzvahs of Purim. I remember the Rebbe responding with the following words. Mivtza Mishleach Mones Bichlal ובפרט הזריקה מהאווירון עשו רושם אז גם להעסקונים דפוי.
בתשכ"ז נסעתי לפורים לרבי. יומיים לפני פורים אומר לי הרב חדקוב שאתה תיסע למינאפוליס, אל מוישה פלר, ואתם ביחד תיסעו משם לאיימס איובה, ואתם תקראו מגילה שם בבית מסוים, ואחרי קריאת המגילה, קראנו מגילה, ועשה לי קשה מאוד על הנשמה. אני בא לרבה לפורים, לשמור שם קריאת מגילה, ולהיות עם הרבה, שולחים אותי למקום כזה. הגעתי לניו יורק, והרבה התוועד אז כמה שעות. אז הרבה אומר משפט כדלהלן. אפשר להיות במרחק 2,000 מייל ממני בגוף, ולהיות בדלת אמות שלי. אפשר לשבת בדלת אמות שלי, ולהיות במרחק של 2,000 מייל.
Allahs kam wie kam, wenn geht zu dem Mifza, zwischen die, was sie sein in Megi, al Bnei Yisrael, al Am Yisrael, und auf alle Bnei Yodam, mikol in Yonim Bilti Rizuyim, bechol Mokim Sheheim, Allahs kam wie kam, bei dem Zova, was in Megi, al Eretz HaKedish, ul Am Adorim Alehu.
נסענו לחלק משלח מנות לבסיסי צבא, שם הרבי אישי, שהרבי היה ממאן את המשלח מנות. היה נהג, איש צבא, באמצע הדרך אנחנו עצרנו, שמענו קולות, צעקות, יורד הנהג ואומר, אנחנו חוזרים חזרה, מולנו יש מחסום של אבנים, עומדים שם 100 ערבים אולי או יותר, והם עם אבנים בידיים, והם כמה כבר זרקו אבנים, והוא אומר, אני לא יכול לקחת אחריות, ואין לעבור את המחסום, ואין מה שיהיה כשהערבים יתחילו להשתולל ולזרוק אבנים. אז אמרתי לו, תשמע, לפני שיצאנו, הרב אמר שהוא לוקח על צווארו האחריות כל מה שיקרה עם כל אחד מהשלוחים. ואז הוא אומר לי, אתה כל כך בטוח ברבי שלך? אמרתי לו, כן. אז הוא אומר, אז אני נוסע. אני זוכר אז את השמחה שהצלחתי לשכנע אחד שבאמת זה היה סכנה. הוא נסע קצת אחורה ונתן גז והתחיל למשוך במהירות על המחסום. האחורה שלנו היה בדיוק מול הערבים, והם התחילו לזרוק אבנים בתוך, אבל אנחנו הצלחנו לעבור בשלום והמשכנו. סיפרתי את זה, מה שיכולתי לספר לחיילים, חילקנו להם משלח מנות ורקדנו, הייתה שמחה גדולה ביותר. חזרנו לירושלים בחזרה, אני צלצלתי עם המזכירות והיה הרב קליין, אני זוכר אז בשופרת, והוא מאוד התעניין כל פרט ופרט. אחרי זה באמצע הלילה, זה היה סביבות 3:30, 4, שהרבי התחיל להתוועד בניו יורק. כשהרבי היה מתוועד, היו שומעים את השידורים.
gesagt die Schluchen bepasst. Aber bald am Kota Schliches. Auf gehen meidet sein Nieden, es am Meer sein Sehen besimchas Puri. Ist auf der Dober Tevet gar nicht in die Treffen. Und gefahren weiter und durchgebrochen, der Machtsehmer mal geprüft, warfen ein paar Steine, und es hat keinem geschaut, nicht die Bnei Yisrael, nicht der Arvim, und ist zugekommen zu der Ansche Chaye, und sie gewähren ein freilicher Purim, decke Isvadus dort, mit alle Brote, wie sie darf sein Purim.
Well, after I started learning Hasidus, I went to several Farbrengens over the years. And the Rebbe started talking about, we're all here and we're having a good time and enjoying, the Torah and the atmosphere and the company. And there are Jews that are all alone in a very dark place. They're in prison. And they have no one to celebrate with them and they have no way of experiencing Purim. And how can we sit here, enjoy Purim when we know that there are other Jews that this joy eludes them. Now it's not surprising to me, but then it was very shocking. Why are you thinking about a few Jews who are in jail? They're probably criminals also, that's why they're in jail. And he asked that people take the initiative and try to get involved in visiting these people and bringing the joy of Yom Tov to them. It was something that transformed my understanding of not only of the Rebbe, but of Yiddishkeit.
Wie der Rambam schreibt in Hilchis Purim, sehen loch Simcha Gdelo Muforo Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Wie Bishas Mesameach Leiva Niim V'chulhu, wo das der Oni Beisi Shoah, die was gefunden sagt in Bote Refi, in Spitelle, die was gefunden sagt in Meshev Skenim oder in Bote Yesemi. Und die, was gefunden sagt, in Bote Asurim, wie Kajetsu, mit darf sie Arese auf mit dem Ingen, was gedeh, das soll durchgeführt werden, wie Schleimus, da da sein an Avedo, nach Achonen Isuderes, in die Jungen Schlifnis.
Wow. Hope you enjoyed that video. It just shows who the Rebbe was. He cared about every single person, Jewish person around the globe, even those that made mistakes, he wanted them to have Purim with joy, and it was really, really special. So it's incredible. There's so much footage out there on Purim about what the Rebbe says. I encourage everyone to tap into it. It's on YouTube. Just Google Purim with the Rebbe. You'll be very fascinated by everything that he says, and everything that he said then is actually a reality now. And we see how they came and danced with the soldiers. And that's what's happening now. The shluchim and people, all the Jewish people, are doing everything that we can to bring joy to the Jewish people in Israel, since it's still a dark time. It's still gullus, and we need to bring light to them. And the entire nation is incredible. All the Jewish people, how we all came together to we're sending, some of us are sending care packages, some of us are sending money, some of us are praying, but everyone's doing something, and it takes a village, and that's what we're doing, and it's the most beautiful thing. And if we stick together, no one could break us, and it's incredible. So I'm going to thank everyone for being here. We're gonna stop the recording, and we're gonna have a Farbringen. So I just want to wish everyone a happy Purim. It should be filled with happiness and joy, and everyone should tap into this holy day. Like Mrs. Gansbourg said, it's like a day of Yom Kippur, and it's a day that we should reflect, have fun, but do it kosher fun, and have just a great time, and inspire and bring joy. When you bring joy to other people, you will be happier. So let's put a smile on someone's face this Purim that may be lonely. It could be a widow. It could be someone that's, it could be the hostages' families. It could be anyone, someone that that's in prison, or you could reach out to the Aleph Institute. What you can do, you can send letters. There's so much that you can do. You can visit people in the hospitals. There's so much opportunity out there to bring a smile to someone's face. And by you doing that, when you give to others, how we give, that's how Hashem's going to give to us. But when we give to others, it brings joy to our personal lives. So let's all be the reason someone smiles today and every day.